With IGN generating a minor Nintendo internet scandal by giving Mario and Luigi Brothership a mediocre 5 out of 10 score, many people have been reflecting on the nature and the impact of review scores. Was IGN really putting the giant cat Mario among the pigeons, or is this all a storm in a teacup? In this video, we're going to try to look at how impactful these review scores actually are, how Nintendo treats its reviews and responds to them, and to look forward to figure out how we might develop a better relationship to reviews in the future. So first up, let's look back, because this topic has, believe it or not, been studied academically. In a 2011 paper called The Impact of Negative Game Reviews and User Comments on Player Experience, in their abstract, they summarize, "We found that both professional reviews and user comments, especially the negative comments, affected experience measured through the game ratings, and that this effect was not mediated by changes in players' moods. Our results are important to the game industry because of the meaningful negative effect that user and critic comments can have on individual player experiences and the resulting commercial success of a game." The article notes that these negative voices may be from critics or users, and it's not always clear who has the most power, but what they wanted to investigate was less whether bad buzz put off people from buying a game, but whether specific negative reviews would actually negatively affect reception. There's a joke from, I want to say, Stephen Merchant, where he says in a restaurant he wants to ask for their cheapest bottle of wine in their most expensive wine bottle. And that's because the presentation of something does actually impact perceptions of quality. It's a force called anchoring. The first impression becomes the norm against which subsequent judgments are measured. It's why psychologists recommend going into salary negotiations by mentioning a salary that is clearly ludicrously high, the thought being that by anchoring in the other person's mind a high salary, coming back with something ludicrously low would feel a lot more difficult for the other negotiating party. So how did the researchers approach this? They explain, "We present a study examining the effect of review text on player experience. The review text was manipulated to be either positive or negative in tone, either relevant to the subsequent gameplay or not, and derived from either an authority, i.e. a critic, or peer, i.e. user. Our results show, 1. Players who read the negative text rated the game significantly lower than players who read positive text. 2. The text had to relate directly to the game to produce biasing effects. 3. The authority of the source, expert or peer, did not produce different biasing effects. And 4. The effects could not be solely attributed to changes in mood as a result of reading the text. And 5. Negative text has a larger biasing effect than positive text." Important for our understanding of biasing effects and the player experience in general, our results have a particular relevance to the game industry, where it is common practice to release games to critics and the media prior to the public release date to get early reviews. So look, this study has its limitations, but they do have some startling conclusions. Now, this has mixed consequences for Nintendo with respect to the IGN interview. On the one hand, it means that any individual negative review could have the same negative impact. But of course, IGN was not just a major source of reviews, but was also amplified across the internet as a result of its surprising score. So, is the better approach to swear off reviews? Well look, there's good reason why we should follow reviews and why Nintendo would want to seek out reviews. For many people, the reviews are immaterial. Wild Style Horses couldn't have stopped me from picking up Tears of the Kingdom when it released. But often, games are more bubble purchases. Games, after all, are expensive in multiple ways. Firstly, they literally cost more than many other sources of entertainment, but also they generally take up more time. For an RPG like Mario and Luigi, which offers potentially dozens of hours of play, you don't want to get several hours in and feel disappointed with the experience. Reviews are also obviously of crucial importance to those bubble games, those games where people are on the fence about picking them up or not. I suggest Mario and Luigi is probably particularly in this category, as the last 12 to 13 months has seen 3 different Mario RPGs. Of course, companies trade a lot on strong reviews as well. One of the favoured trailer formats from Nintendo is the Accolades trailer. These are great for titles like Metroid Prime Remastered and Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, which are clearly well-regarded large games, and it's a measure of industry respect, although I was amused recently to see that Nintendo UK has put out an Accolades trailer for Super Mario Party Jamboree, showing that even a fun party game can be subject to strict quality controls. Still, these major outlets probably have a fairly limited reach. IGN is obviously big with the gaming space, but its audience is a tiny fraction of people who purchase games. Business Insider identified that a more major source of influence was Amazon reviews. Their key findings included that an item with 1 review is 65% more likely to be purchased than an item with no reviews. 1/3 of customers won't buy a product that doesn't have any reviews, that Amazon reviews are trusted more than any other type of review, and that on average, positive reviews increase sales by 20%. Now, it's difficult to infer too much from all these generalized statistics to Nintendo's specific case. After all, Nintendo have a pre-existing reputation and sell much more broadly than just through Amazon. Still, it is a major sales funnel for them. I guess the deeper problem is that if you believe the research I mentioned earlier, that an initial negative impression of a game could lead other people to see their experiences through the prism of negativity, so subsequent reviews would also have a pessimism bias, dampening enthusiasm for the product. Basically, that one IGN review could grandfather a whole suite of negative or slightly more negative Amazon reviews, and those would be more trusted by potential buyers. So how do Nintendo view this situation? Well, they discussed this a little in a prior investor conference. At that time, which was 2015, sales were not necessarily excellent for Nintendo's suite of consoles and games, but they said that, and I quote, "We have received high evaluations of the quality of these titles. Foreign website Metacritic.com is well known for its Metascore system that shows the average score out of 100 from various game media and websites. In other words, the Metascore is an index that shows how professional reviewers evaluated these games. Metacritic.com also takes reviews from users and discloses the average figure as the user score. We must understand that even among game players, majority of consumers that visit Metacritic.com are considered avid game fans. However, if a game receives both a high Metascore and a high user score, many consumers use this as a guide to judge the quality of the game. Basically, this is confirmation that Metacritic scores are of severe interest to Nintendo in terms of identifying the strengths and weaknesses of its software, but also note the fact that they refer to this as a foreign website, which of course to Nintendo it is. Review aggregating sites tend to be American-based, and so there is a certain ability for Nintendo to divorce itself psychologically as well. However, at this point, Nintendo were really going into fine detail when talking about review scores. I quote, "Nintendo of America posted this picture on its official Facebook page at the end of last year. It shows a list of packaged game titles that received a Metascore of 85 or more and a user score of 8.5 plus or more on Metacritic.com, which we can admit received high scores from both the professional reviewers and consumers. For Nintendo's current platforms, Nintendo 3DS and Wii U, 19 titles met these criteria. In contrast, the current platforms of other companies, PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and PlayStation Vita, totaled 8 titles. When a brand new title is released, there are often misconceptions at the outset, so I would not take the Metacritic.com Metascores and user scores as the absolute tell-all index, but I do want us to do our best to release such highly evaluated titles in succession. In fact, software available on our platforms continues to be reviewed highly even after the turn of the year. The 2 software titles which were released simultaneously with the new Nintendo 3DS hardware in the US and Europe, The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask 3D and Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate received the very high Metascores of 90 and 86, and user scores of 9.5 and 8.9 respectively, compared to the Metascore of 79, which the prequel in the Monster Hunter series, Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, received. We can understand that this most recent iteration is very highly reviewed. This is really them going all in on Metacritic statistics as a judge of quality, although it is important to note that section, this is not an absolute tell-all index, because games can be subject to misconceptions at the outset, and I think that's a very interesting caveat which they might refer back to at this point. I think it's curious though that they released this commentary on game success at a point when the company was at a very low ebb financially. When other indicators of success are down, it's of huge value to promote the metrics which are still in your favour, but I don't know that I would expect to see Nintendo talking about granular Metacritic scores like this today. But I guess the key is, did the Metacritic score link to strong sales? Nintendo said yes. I quote one more time. This graph compares our preliminary sales data for The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask 3D and Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate for the release week, 3 days for the US and 2 days for Europe, to the counterparts of their previous works, The Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds and Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate. The sales of the Monster Hunter series in the US are not available in the graph because we have not finished compiling the exact data on the titles, which are published by Capcom, and it was a holiday there yesterday. We have heard from Capcom, however, that their initial sales of Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate, including the special edition hardware with the title pre-installed, is more than 3 times as fast as Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate in a quick estimation. They both had promising starts thanks to strong pre-orders and their highly acclaimed gameplay. Ex-Nintendo of America employees turned superstar podcasters Kit and Krista always have interesting takes on these things, and in a recent podcast, they noted that not only do Nintendo take these reviews very seriously, but they would also hold the marketing team accountable for the reviews at times, which means the launch of Color Splash must have been particularly miserable a time for Nintendo's marketers. But you can see why Nintendo might feel that good reviews are essential as a part of their marketing strategy, and why the right packaging and the right presentation might be able to nudge review scores upwards. And let's be honest, Nintendo have benefited from the reverse of this trend often. Early reviews of Zelda Skyward Sword on Wii were absolutely adulatory, and yet when the game got into players' hands for longer, people had a more mixed reaction to it. Zelda games, I think, are particularly vulnerable to the expectation effect and having a high initial score. The games are so rare and often so brilliant that sometimes their flaws are more obvious a few weeks later. Having said that, if you've put over 100 hours into a game, and in the case of Zelda titles, potentially several hundred hours, and are still no longer finding it as fun as you once did, then I really don't think it's fair to park that at the door of a game when so many experiences never offer anywhere near that kind of long gameplay life in the first place. The risk of a poor first impression doesn't appear to have put Nintendo off what I consider to be one of its most frustrating strategies, that particularly seen with Mario sports titles of releasing a rather lean offering and then bulking it up over time with free DLC. The risk here is that the initial reviews are of a lower value offer and the full joy of a game only becomes apparent over time. Kirby Star Allies launched to a rather muted set of initial reviews, and yet later expansions have made it, I understand, a much stronger experience. But the review scores and Metacritic ratings largely stick. I think in the case of Kirby, this was an understandable move, as Nintendo was struggling to get content up for the second year of the Switch, and all these 2018 titles would have been developed, or at least started in development, at a time when Nintendo was at its lowest ebb. However, personally, I was far more disappointed with the treatment of a game like Mario Strikers Battle League. However, while reviews are one avenue of promotion, they are not the only tool Nintendo has at their disposal to promote their games. Satoru Iwata once commented that each time we do a Nintendo Direct broadcast, more people visit the Nintendo eShop to download game demos. And the 1-2 punch of Directs and demos is a very effective way to bypass the first impressions ecosystem entirely and have people enjoy the game even if they have no experience of any review scores. This is particularly effective for games which have what viewers in the UK would call Marmite qualities. Marmite being a popular spread which made a virtue in its advertisements of being so divisive that people either love it or hate it. And let's face it, there are many games that have that Marmite quality. It's possible to imagine generic game reviewers reacting negatively to a title like Famicom Detective Club Emmy of the Smiling Man, which is different from most other titles and has two storytelling genres, horror and detective fiction, which are in themselves quite niche. Therefore, using demos was a very smart way to head off any potential criticism by getting the game into the hands of the people who might be the most curious in a low-stakes way. So what is the problem with the review ecosystem we have at the moment, and is there a solution? Some people say that review scores themselves are the problem, and of course these arbitrary metrics may appeal to people who enjoy ranking and categorization, but they very seldom convey any true meaning. One person's 9 out of 10 might be very different from somebody else's 6 out of 7. I love Zelda Tears of the Kingdom and I love Picross titles, but what possible set of game metric scores could encompass both of them with an equivalent set of scores? And yet, in many respects, I think the benefits aren't in any individual review, but in the ability to get an idea of the consensus among many people. And here, a specific score is useful. Random variability means that it would be surprising if there weren't the odd IGN outlier reviews, but these should average out in something like the Metacritic algorithm. Of course, these numbers don't convey the quality of the experience, and we haven't even got into controversies around review bombing and paid-for reviews which skew the metrics still further. Ultimately, Nintendo's best bet is to try to maintain such a consistent quality that people take a punt on them irrespective of review scores, and generally speaking, this is what they managed to do. Almost all their releases fit into existing brands, and these brands have strong pre-existing recognition and track records of quality. And if you can get people to follow these specific franchises or characters as opposed to the specific review scores because they're confident that the experience that will be delivered by Nintendo will be good, come what may, then you as a company are better insulated against the negative impact of one or two bad outlying reviews. I also feel like it would be helpful to weight reviews in accordance to the amount of a game that has been played by the reviewer. A 10 out of 10 review after 5 hours spent playing may not be as impressive as a 9 out of 10 review after 50 hours spent playing. We've all had games which were great at first, but didn't have enough in them to stick the landing, and equally, there are titles which can take a fair amount of getting into, but are worth it in the end. At any rate, thank you to the patron supporters of this channel, thank you for watching, and do check out these classic videos on screen for more. Otherwise, take care, and I will see you next time for another Nintendo Forecast.